Can you have a favorite neurotransmitter? Does that make you a super nerd? I consider myself a super nerd anyway, and I definitely have a favorite neurotransmitter, and that would be GABA. So what is GABA? GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter, and it is released by many of the neurons in the brain. When we speak about it, we would say that it's released globally in the brain. That's not actually true, but many, many neurons. And its counterpart is the excitatory neurotransmitter, glutamate. Not quite my favorite. I like it sometimes. Anyway, why am I mentioning it? Well, it seems that one of the reasons that yoga is so beneficial for mental health is its capacity to increase GABA. Now, for those of you out there with a scientific background, you will know that in fact, GABA affects the brain in various different ways. But for the intents and purposes of this video, let's just focus on its ability to inhibit fear-based pathways. Now, Dr. Chris Streeter at the Boston University School of Medicine, who is a friend of mine, is an amazing human being. She is not only a lecturer at a medical school, she's also a neurologist, a psychiatrist, and later became an Iyengar yoga teacher. I'm not sure anyone else in the world has those specific qualifications. And she was really intrigued. There were a group of patient populations that would be prescribed things that increase levels of GABA in the brain, like people with chronic pain, PTSD, epilepsy, depression, and anxiety. And those people were improving from a yoga class. So she thought, I wonder, can yoga increase levels of GABA? May this be one of the salutary effects, right? Healthy effects associated with it. So, in 2007, she conducted her first study, and she did find actually that yoga led to statistically significant increases in GABA. But her critics said, well, maybe it's anything. Maybe you can do this, or this, or this, or anything at all. How do you know it's GABA if you don't have an active control? And she's right, a serious scientist. So she said, indeed, that's correct. So in 2010, she did another study at the medical school gym, and she had a walking group. So they were doing something that was metabolically matched in terms of levels of activity to the group doing Iyengar yoga in the same gym, and both groups were silent. And what did she find? Not only did yoga again increase GABA levels to statistically significant levels, but they were statistically significantly higher than what was found in the walking group, which really suggests that it is the yoga that is making the difference. Then in 2012, she paired up with Dr. Patricia Gerberg. Hi, Pat. Pat is like my second mom. And the two of them wrote this amazing paper in Medical Hypothesis that I suggest you look at, investigating how yoga might be able to not only increase the release of GABA in the brain and the specific effects it would have, but how over time the increased release of GABA would allow neural networks to change and really shift, therefore, perception, which is what happens to yogis that they've been reporting for thousands of years. I practice yoga, and I see myself in the world differently. This model that they created relied heavily on the vagus, the idea that both slow controlled breathing and held movement, remember because she's relying on Iyengar, would provide specific inputs from the organs and the lungs to the vagus, increasing levels of GABA release to the brain. That would have an effect in one session, and over time actually shift brain networks. And then finally, in 2020, she published another study where she looked at a depressed population, because the others had been healthy. So the question is, can you get the same benefit for people who actually have a mental health issue? And she combined the Iyengar yoga with coherent breathing, because Dr. Patricia Gerberg and her husband, Dr. Richard Brown, are well known internationally for their work on coherent breathing. And again, what did they find? Yoga increased GABA. But this was a dosing study. And that's really interesting, right? Because if we're thinking about yoga as a prescription, how much do you need to take? You know that when you take paracetamol, if you're in the United States, Tylenol, right? Or any other country, I don't know what your name is, but you get it. How much do you need to take? And what she found is that any increases in GABA would be staved off after 8 days, which meant that in order to gain real benefit, we need to practice at least twice a week. And then it does seem that if you practice more than twice a week, it likely will increase GABA, but the spike difference is not as great. The big difference is between nothing and something once a week, and then doing it twice a week. But there, in mental health, is definitely a dose-response curve where the more you take, the better off you tend to be if you're doing the right practice. I hope that's helpful, and I am very grateful for Dr. Streeter and Dr. Gebhardt for providing this knowledge to our field.